He thought the old boarding house he inherited would hold nothing but dust, creaking floors, and faded memories. But when the giant Virgin Sisters stepped forward and said, "We own your body now," it left only one question: had he claimed a home, or surrendered himself to a fate that would test every ounce of his will? The letter had come on a Tuesday morning, sealed in wax, and carried by a dust-worn rider who spoke little. Calder Boone, a man who had never expected fortune to find him, turned it over in his hands 3 times before daring to break the seal. Inside was a claim of blood and legacy. An uncle he barely remembered had left him property in a place called Eldergrove, a dying town far off the main trails. The property, the letter said, was a boarding house. A roof, walls, and land enough to keep a man sheltered for the rest of his days. Calder had known hunger more than comfort. The notion of inheriting anything at all struck him as strange fortune. He packed what little he owned into a canvas roll and rode west, his horse weary but loyal. Days blurred into one another until the road delivered him to Eldergrove, a town of sagging porches, shuttered windows, and more silence than commerce. The boarding house stood at the edge of it, a hulking 3-story structure of weather-beaten timber and stone. Its roof lines jutted like crooked teeth against the reddening sky. Once, it might have welcomed travelers with lamplight and warm meals. Now, the shutters rattled in the wind, and the front steps sagged under their own weight. Calder dismounted, boots crunching against gravel as he tied off his horse. The key from the letter felt cold in his palm, heavier than iron should be. He slid it into the lock, half expecting it to resist. Instead, the door yielded with a slow groan, the smell of dust and old wood rolling out to meet him. Inside, the air was thick, as though no window had been opened in years. A grand staircase rose from the foyer, its banister carved with strange looping patterns that the grime had not fully hidden. Portraits lined the walls, faces stern, eyes following him in the dim light that leaked through cracked shutters. He set down his pack, struck a match, and lit the nearest lamp. Shadows stretched long across the parlor. Tables stood as though waiting for guests that never arrived. Chairs leaned at uneasy angles, their cushions chewed by time. Calder moved slowly, each step sending echoes through the silence. He told himself he was alone, yet more than once he felt the prickling sensation of being watched. At the far end of the hall, a door creaked, as though nudged by unseen hands. He froze, match burning low between his fingers. The sound stilled. He let the match die and struck another, forcing himself to breathe evenly. "Empty," he muttered under his breath, though the word did little to steady him. As he climbed the stairs, the floorboards groaned louder than his weight should have allowed. At the landing, a draft whispered through the corridor, stirring cobwebs into lazy motion. He stepped past a row of closed doors, each one bearing an iron number plate tarnished by years. Then, from somewhere above, perhaps the attic, came the faint, deliberate scrape of footsteps. Not rats, not wind, footsteps. Calder's hand fell to the revolver at his hip. The house he thought abandoned was not abandoned at all. Something, or someone, was already waiting for him. Calder steadied his breath, thumb grazing the hammer of his revolver as the noise above grew sharper, measured steps. Too heavy for vermin, too deliberate for the house to be settling. He eased along the upper hall, lamplight trembling across wallpaper stained by age. The shadows lengthened until they seemed to move on their own, curling against the walls like living things. The first door on the left creaked open before he could touch it. His hand froze midair. From the darkness beyond stepped a figure taller than any woman he had ever seen. She ducked slightly beneath the frame, shoulders brushing the wood, as though the hallway itself was too small to contain her. Her hair was a dark cascade, her eyes glinting with the reflection of his trembling lamp. Calder's instinct was to step back, but his boots rooted to the floor. Before he could speak, 2 more emerged from the rooms beyond Sisters. By their shared height, and unmistakable resemblance. Each moved with slow, commanding certainty, their long gowns whispering across the warped floorboards. "You've come at last," the first one said, her voice carrying the low resonance of someone accustomed to obedience. Calder's throat worked around a dry swallow. "I didn't expect anyone here. This house was left to me." The second sister's lips curled, half amusement, half warning. "Left to you?" She stepped closer, and Calder felt the boards bend beneath her weight. "This house belongs to us, and now so do you." The third one spoke last, her tones softer but edged with finality. "We own your body now." The words fell into him like a chain thrown across the shoulders. His grip on the revolver tightened, though he did not lift it. For the first time in years, he found himself uncertain not of his aim, but of whether it would matter. Their size, their presence, made the gun feel like a child's toy. "I don't know what you think you're claiming," Calder said, steadying his voice, "but I've inherited this house by law." The first sister stepped close enough that he could see the pale line of a scar running along her jaw. She looked down at him with eyes that flickered between pity and ownership. "Law doesn't bind us, fate does, and fate has brought you here for us." A silence pressed against him, heavy as the air before a storm. The sisters moved in a slow circle, closing his path to the stairwell. Their gowns brushed the floor like the sweep of curtains, sealing a stage. Calder forced a breath, tilting his chin up to meet their gaze. "If fate brought me here, it didn't tell me why." The second sister leaned down, her hair spilling like a curtain between them. Her whisper carried the scent of old cedar, and something sharper, metallic. "You'll learn, in time, but you will not leave." The lamp hissed as its oil guttered low. Their shadows swelled higher against the walls, taller than the ceiling should allow. Calder felt the weight of the house itself shifting around him, as though its timbers had accepted their words as law. Whatever inheritance he had imagined a place of rest, a chance at solitude had been stripped away the moment he crossed the threshold. He had no owner here. He was the possession. Calder Boone had worked on ranches, fought through border skirmishes, and endured nights under storms that tore tents to ribbons, yet nothing had unsettled him like the three towering sisters who now hemmed him in. Their words clung to him, like shackles. "We own your body now." And though his instinct screamed to fight, a deeper caution warned him. These women were not a threat he could solve with bullets. They did not strike or seize him. Instead, the eldest sister, her scarred jaw catching the faint lamplight, spoke with the authority of someone handing down a sentence. "You'll tend this house as we command. From dawn to dusk, every task we set before you will be done." Calder's jaw tightened. "I came here to claim my inheritance, not to play servant." The middle sister, her voice edged with a bitter laugh, leaned forward until her shadow eclipsed him. "Inheritance?" She brushed the banister with one long hand, the carved wood groaning beneath her touch. "The house chose you, cowboy. But we claimed it long before your name ever reached paper." Before he could argue further, the youngest slipped behind him, blocking the stairwell. Though her tone was softer, her words cut deepest. "Defiance will break you faster than labor. Do as you're told, and you may yet survive in these walls." The revolver at Calder's side suddenly felt heavier than it ever had. He had no doubt he could draw faster than most men, but staring up at their towering forms, he questioned whether steel and powder would matter. His gut told him they'd swat bullets aside, like flies. At dawn, they set him to work. The first command: clear the front steps of weeds and rot. The eldest watched from the porch, arms folded, while Calder gripped the rusted spade. Each strike into the soil rang hollow, like the earth itself was resisting him. By noon, sweat slicked his back, but he refused to show weakness. When he paused, the middle sister's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Keep digging. A man who rests without leave proves he's unworthy." Calder bit back the retort, burning in his throat. He was no one's mule, yet the eyes of all three bore down on him with the same weight, as an army's rifles. He dug until his hands blistered, then dug more. At dusk, they led him inside. The youngest pushed a broom into his calloused palms. "The halls must be swept clean each night," she murmured. "The dust creeps if left to settle, and dust has its own hunger." The words puzzled him, but he obeyed. The corridors echoed with each scrape of the broom, portraits glaring down as though mocking his labor. When he finally set the broom aside, the sisters gathered in the parlor. "You see now," the eldest declared, her voice reverberating through the rafters, "what fate demands. You are no master here, Calder Boone. You are bound to us." And though every muscle in him wanted to shout his defiance, the truth pressed cold against his chest. He was trapped, bound not by chains of iron, but by their will. The following morning began before the sun had even crested the distant hills. Calder woke to the sound of a door slamming open, the reverberation shaking dust from the rafters. The middle sister loomed in the doorway, her silhouette blotting out the dim light from the corridor. "Up," she ordered, her tone leaving no room for question. "The wells run dry. You'll draw water until the cistern's full." Calder swung his legs over the side of the bed. His muscles ached from the endless labor of the day before, yet he forced himself to stand tall, refusing to show them weariness. The revolver lay on the nightstand within reach, but he left it untouched. A weapon was useless against chains that weren't made of iron. Out in the yard, the sisters stood in a loose semicircle, watching as he hauled bucket after bucket from the deep stone well. The rope cut into his palms, his shoulders burning with each pull. He refused to ask how many more trips were expected. To show weakness would be to grant them victory. The eldest spoke after what felt like hours. "You work hard for a man who calls himself master of this house." Calder gritted his teeth. "I never said master, only rightful owner." The youngest tilted her head, studying him with unsettling calm. "Rightful ownership is tested, not claimed. Do you think paper makes you strong?" He met her gaze, refusing to look away. "Strength isn't proven by bending another man. It's in standing when the world wants you broken." The words earned him a fleeting silence. For a heartbeat, the youngest's expression softened, though the moment was gone as quickly as it appeared. The middle sister sneered, thrusting a broom into his hands once more. "Then stand and prove it," she said. "Every floor, every stair, until the boards gleam." Inside, Calder attacked the work with grim determination. The wooden planks groaned beneath his boots as he swept. His arms trembled, not from the broom's weight, but from the deliberate cruelty of endless repetition. Still, he pressed on, telling himself that each stroke of the bristles was a refusal to yield. When night fell, the sisters convened in the parlor again. The eldest spoke with cool certainty, her scar catching the lamplight. "You labor as commanded, yet you burn with rebellion. Do you believe defiance will outlast us?" Calder straightened, exhaustion carved deep into his features, yet fire still alive in his eyes. "I believe no man or woman has the right to own another. You can demand, but I won't give myself freely." The middle sister's hand shot out, seizing his wrist with startling strength. Her grip tightened until his bones ached, but Calder refused to cry out. His silence, his steadiness, seemed to fuel her fury. "Then we will break you, piece by piece," she hissed. The youngest, standing apart, studied him in silence. Something flickered in her eyes, not cruelty, but curiosity. Calder caught the look and held it, a fragile spark of understanding in a house built on shadows. He knew then the tests would not end. They would grind him down until he either yielded or proved unyielding. The boarding house was no inheritance, it was a crucible. By the third day of endless commands, Calder Boone had learned two things. The sisters never tired of testing him, and the house itself seemed to watch his every move. The timbers creaked in patterns too deliberate to be wind, and the air carried whispers that made his skin prickle. Still, he endured, hauling water, scrubbing halls, repairing shutters, anything to hold his ground. When evening finally came, he seized the chance to slip into town under the pretense of buying oil for his lamp. The sisters allowed it, though their eyes followed him as if invisible threads still bound him to their will. Eldergrove was little more than a scattering of buildings clinging to a muddy street. A saloon, a church with a steeple that leaned like a tired man, and a general store whose windows reflected the last orange rays of dusk. Calder tied his horse at the post and pushed through the store's door, greeted by the smell of old tobacco and kerosene. The shopkeeper, a stooped elder with a white beard stained by pipe smoke, glanced up from his ledger. His eyes narrowed the moment they fixed on Calder. "You're the one took Boone House." Calder set the empty oil tin on the counter. "It was left to me. I didn't know anyone else laid claim." The old man leaned close, lowering his voice until it barely carried over the creak of the floorboards. "Claim? Son, that house ain't property. It's a curse. Every soul who set foot in it thinking they owned it, gone. Some vanished, some found cold as stone come morning. And always those three." Calder's jaw tightened. "The sisters?" The shopkeeper nodded grimly. "Tall as pine trunks, pale as moonlight, and bound to that place like roots to soil. Folks whisper they were born in that house when the town was young, and when fire took their kin, they swore no man would ever rule it again. Since then, the boarding house has kept them, and they've kept it. Virgin still, or so the talk goes. Their vow is their strength, and their strength is their prison." The words struck Calder with a weight heavier than any labor. He had thought them flesh and blood, however strange. Now he wondered if he had stepped into something older, darker. "Why let me inherit it then? Why send me a letter?" The elder's eyes dropped to the counter. "No one sent it. The papers come sure, but not by human hand. That house chooses, like it's hunting for the next fool. You're only here because it wanted you here." A cold wind rattled the glass panes, though the night outside was still. Calder paid for the oil, his mind burning with more questions than answers. As he turned to leave, the old man caught his sleeve. "Son," he warned, voice hoarse with years of dread, "if you value your soul, don't linger in that place. No man leaves Boone House unchanged." Outside, Calder mounted his horse, the road back to the boarding house stretching like a gallows path beneath the rising moon. He realized then the inheritance was no gift. It was a snare, and the sisters were both its keepers and its chains. The night Calder Boone returned from town, the boarding house felt alive in a way it hadn't before. The shutters rattled without wind, the timbers pulsed as though they held a heartbeat, and every stair groaned in anticipation of his footfalls. He carried the lamp oil under his arm, but the light spilling from the parlor told him the sisters had already prepared for his return. They were waiting. All three stood in a triangle about the center rug, their gowns brushing the floor like banners in a breeze that did not exist. The lamplight did not touch them evenly. Shadows clung to their forms, exaggerating their height until their heads nearly grazed the rafters. "Come closer," the eldest commanded, her scar catching the glow. Calder hesitated, but something unseen tugged him forward. His boots clicked against the wood, each step narrowing the gap until he stood inside their circle. The middle sister produced a brass bowl, tarnished with age, filled with water that shimmered unnaturally. She lifted it high, her voice rolling low and steady. Words older than the town filled the parlor, curling like smoke around Calder's ears. He didn't recognize the language, but the sound of it carried weight, like stones dragged across a grave. The youngest stepped forward, placing a hand on his chest. Her palm was cool, her fingers long enough to curl around his ribs as though testing his strength. "You are bound," she whispered. "Flesh to wood, breath to stone. The house has taken you." Calder forced himself not to recoil. "I belong to no house, and no vow binds me but my own." The eldest's eyes narrowed. "Still your tongue. The rights are not for debate." She joined the chant, her deep tone blending with her sister's. The floor trembled beneath them, dust drifting from the rafters like ash. Calder's pulse hammered. He had fought storms and men alike, but never voices that bent the air itself. His hand twitched toward his revolver, yet he knew steel would mean nothing here. Instead, he focused on his breathing, steady and slow, anchoring himself against the weight pressing in. At the height of the ritual, the middle sister lowered the bowl. She dipped her fingers and flicked water across his face. The drops stung, not with heat or cold, but with something that sank deeper, a pressure behind his eyes, a heaviness in his chest. "You feel it," the youngest said softly, her gaze unreadable. "The bond is real. The house claims you, and through it, we claim you." Calder wiped the water away, forcing a thin smile. "I've been claimed before by war, by hunger, by men who thought they could break me. I'm still here. That should tell you something." For the first time, silence rippled through the sisters. The chant faltered. The shadows receded. The eldest's jaw tightened, but the youngest's eyes lingered on him with something close to curiosity. The ritual ended, but Calder knew it was not finished. He had been marked, whether by superstition or something darker. Each night in that house, he would be drawn deeper into their will. And yet, in his defiance, he had planted a seed, an unease among the sisters, that might one day grow into his only advantage. The morning after the ritual, Calder Boone rose, with his body aching but his spirit unbroken. The water they had flung on him still burned in memory, though his skin showed no mark. He tightened his belt, squared his shoulders, and stepped into the corridor as if daring the sisters to meet his gaze. The eldest was waiting at the stairwell, her scarred jaw stiff, arms folded across her chest. "Downstairs," she ordered. Her tone held less command than habit, as though she expected obedience simply because she always received it. Calder met her eyes for a long moment before descending at his own pace, forcing her to step aside. In the parlor, the three sisters stood in a loose cluster. The middle sister sneered the moment he entered. "The house bends to us, not to you. Your stubbornness is wasted." Calder shrugged. "If the house wanted me broken, I'd already be in pieces." The youngest's lips twitched, almost into a smile, though she lowered her eyes quickly. The reaction did not escape the notice of the others. The day's labor was announced, repairing the roof slates battered by storms. Calder scaled the ladder with nails clenched between his teeth, hammer in hand. From below, the middle sister barked at him to hurry, as if her voice could hasten the Sunday. But when Calder set his pace steady and deliberate, the youngest drifted nearer to the ladder, watching quietly. "You'll fall if you rush," she murmured, so soft the others might not hear. Calder glanced down, caught her expression, curiosity, not command. "I've kept my footing in worse places," he answered, voice low, "but I appreciate the warning." A flicker passed between them, something the eldest did not miss. "Do not speak to him alone," she snapped at her sister. "He'll twist your words to loosen our bond." "I only spoke the truth," the youngest replied, her tone mild but edgy. That single exchange cracked the stillness of their unity. Calder heard it the faintest discord, like the first groan of ice breaking on a river. By dusk, when the roof was mended and his arms ached with fatigue, Calder descended the ladder. The middle sister shoved the broom toward him with unnecessary force. Again, the halls before nightfall. He took it without protest, but his eyes lingered on the youngest. She met his gaze steadily before turning away, yet her hesitation spoke louder than words. Later, when the house settled into evening quiet, Calder passed her in the hallway. The eldest and middle were nowhere in sight. She paused at the edge of shadow, her tall frame bent slightly, as though shielding a secret. "You are different from the others who came," she said quietly. "They yielded, quickly." "And what did that earn them?" Calder asked. Her silence was enough. Before she could say more, the middle sister's footsteps thundered down the hall. The youngest straightened at once, mask restored. But Calder had seen behind it, if only for a heartbeat. There were cracks in their control, cracks he might yet pry wider. The morning air in Eldergrove carried a brittle edge when Calder Boone rode into town for supplies. His shirt clung damp to his back from the sisters' endless labor, yet it was not fatigue that weighed him down, it was the memory of the youngest's words. They yielded quickly. That silence afterward had spoken louder than thunder. The general store was busier than on his last visit. A pair of farmhands leaned against the counter, while the old shopkeeper sorted nails into a tin. Conversation hushed the moment Calder entered. He removed his hat, scanning faces that all looked away too quickly. "You're still breathing," one of the farmhands muttered. "Didn't think you'd last a week in that place." Calder ignored him, setting flour and coffee on the counter. The shopkeeper's hands shook slightly as he measured out the beans. "Best leave, son," he whispered, eyes fixed on the scale. "That house doesn't give back what it takes. The town near washed its hands of it and of you, if you stay." Calder kept his voice level. "I didn't come to vanish. I came because blood left me the deed." The farmhand barked a humorless laugh. "Paper doesn't stand against them. Every man who tried to claim that house ended up in the ground or gone without trace. You think you're stronger? You'll ruin us all." Their hostility was not born of malice alone, it was fear, deep-rooted and festering. Calder gathered his supplies, met the shopkeeper's downcast eyes, and left without another word. But the unease followed him. He felt the weight of stares through shutter cracks, the quick hush of conversation as he passed. Eldergrove had marked him already as a man bound to the sisters' curse. On the ride back, the land itself seemed to echo the town's dread. The trees leaned inward over the path, their limbs bare, though the season was not yet cold. Once he glimpsed a shape on the ridge, tall, still, watching. When he reined in for a better look, it was gone. By the time Calder reached the boarding house, the sisters were waiting on the porch. The eldest's eyes flicked to the sack in his hand. "The town spoke to you," she said, not as a question, but a statement. "They warned me off," Calder admitted. "Said no man leaves this house unchanged." The middle sister smirked, her shadow stretching long across the steps. "At last the town speaks the truth." But the youngest only studied him, unreadable. That night, strange accidents began. The cistern rope snapped when Calder drew water, nearly dragging him headfirst into the dark. A shutter above fell loose and crashed beside him as he passed. Each mishap bore the mark of design rather than chance. When he confronted the sisters, the eldest's reply was chilling. "The house protects its claim, the town fears it, and soon you will too." Calder clenched his fists, resolving burning hotter than fear. If the town had turned hostile, and the house itself sought to break him, then his fight was not for inheritance anymore, it was for survival. 3 nights after the accidents began, Calder Boone was summoned to the parlor. He found the 3 sisters waiting in rigid formation, their gowns falling like shadows around their feet, their towering figures lit by the amber glow of a single lamp. The hearth was cold, though the air burned heavy with expectation. The eldest spoke first, her scar catching the light like a drawn blade. "You've resisted long enough, the house has tested you, and still you stand. But now, you must choose." Calder's jaw tightened. "Choose what?" The middle sister's voice cut across his question, sharp and final. "Submit fully, body, mind, and will. You will belong to us without question, or you will leave this place forever." The youngest's gaze flickered, as though she wished to add something but bit back her words. Calder took a step forward, planting his boots firm against the boards. "Leave?" He let the word hang. "You'd have let me ride out days ago if that was true. No, I think this house has no doors for me anymore." The eldest's expression hardened. "Then you already understand. If you walk away, the house will claim you piece by piece, until nothing of you remains. If you stay, you are ours. There is no third road." Calder felt the walls pressing in, the portraits glaring down from their dusty frames as if waiting for his answer. He had known ultimatums before commanders barking orders in battle. outlaws holding him at gunpoint, but never one like this, where the very timbers of a house seemed to lean closer to hear him speak. He weighed his options, though each seemed a noose. Submission meant chains more binding than any iron, yet banishment sounded no less fatal. Still, he refused to let them see fear. "What did the others choose?" he asked, voice steady. "The men before me, the ones who yielded quickly." The youngest's eyes widened, but the eldest silenced her with a glare. The middle sister smirked. They submitted, and in submission they were consumed. The house takes what it's given. Calder nodded slowly. Then perhaps yielding isn't survival after all. Perhaps it's just a slower death. The parlor fell silent. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. For the first time since stepping into Eldergrove, Calder sensed the sisters did not hold every card. The eldest stepped closer, towering over him. "Defy us, and you'll learn the full weight of fate. This house will strip you of everything until you beg for chains." Calder looked up, unflinching. "I've begged no man, no storm, no war. I won't start with you." For the briefest instant, the youngest's lips parted not in mockery, but in something like admiration. The eldest noticed, and fury burned across her scarred face. "Then let the house decide," she hissed. The lamp guttered. The walls trembled. Somewhere above, a door slammed, though no hand touched it. Calder understood then. His choice had been made not in words, but in standing his ground. The house itself would now deliver the judgment. The house shuddered, as if breathing through its beams, every window rattling in unison. Calder Boone stood in the center of the parlor, his fists clenched, as the sisters spread around him like sentinels of judgment. The eldest scar gleamed pale in the flickering lamplight. "The house has heard," she declared, her voice rolling like thunder through the rafters. "Now it will claim its due." Above them, footsteps pounded across the ceiling, too many for 3 women, too heavy for human stride. The walls moaned. From the portraits, painted eyes seemed to bleed shadow, spilling across the floor until Calder's boots stood in a pool of moving black. He fought the urge to step back. "If this house wants me, it can come and take me, but I'll not kneel to you." The middle sister hissed, fury twisting her face. "Still you defy." She raised her hands, and the shadows leapt higher, coiling like ropes around his legs. Calder braced himself, struggling against the pull, every muscle burning as if the darkness itself had weight. But then the youngest moved not toward him, but toward her sisters, her tall frame cut between their circling shadows, her voice steady though her eyes shone with conflict. "Enough. He has stood through every test. If the house wished for him to be destroyed, it would have swallowed him already." The eldest's head snapped toward her. "Do not question our vow." "I question nothing," the youngest replied. "But I see what you refuse. The house chose him not to be broken, but to bind us. All these years, we've claimed men, but none endured. He has. That makes him different." Calder's chest heaved as the shadows slackened, just enough for him to draw breath. "So that's why you wanted me," he said, voice ragged. "Not to serve, not to inherit, but to anchor your curse." The silence that followed was answer enough. The eldest's expression softened into something colder than anger. Resignation. "Yes. Without you our vow withers. With you it endures. That is your fate, Calder Boone. Bound to us, bound to this house, until its timbers rot, and your bones lie in the soil beneath it." The middle sister stepped close, her towering form blotting out the hearth's glow. "Submit, and live as part of us. Resist, and the house will grind you until there's nothing left but ash in its cracks." Calder lifted his chin, defiance still burning though his arms trembled from the struggle. "You can bind my body, but my will's my own. That's one thing no curse touches." The youngest's gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Perhaps pity, perhaps something else. She whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear, "Then let that be your strength. You may hate your chains, but you will never break. The lamp guttered once more, plunging the parlor into near darkness. When the flame steadied again, the sisters stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of shadow and pale faces. You are ours, the eldest said. Not for a season, not for a year, forever. And Calder Boone, though his spirit still blazed, felt the truth settle around him like iron. His inheritance was no gift. It was a sentence. He was bound not by law, not by love, but by fate. Forever. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.